Because yes,
you're
okay, you want to talk about throwing babies out with the bathwater? Margaret Sanger wanted to exterminate the black race because she thought they were weeds. So yeah, we can literally talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's what Margaret Sanger, that's what Democrat policies wanted to do to my people. So that's why I feel so strongly about it.
So welcome in, everyone. You're listening to a black conservative versus a white liberal. And let's hear these conversations and let's get into the nitty-gritty about what's actually happened. Can black people still hold white people accountable for the sins of their forefathers, and or does black people need to forget about what it is that has taken place that did cause and create poverty at that time? And is that still the reason black people are at the bottom of every social metric in society? Allow us to listen to this debate, and we'll kick in some commentary in just a few minutes. Allow us to switch it over into another part of this conversation and allow them to get their talking points on. And we'll dive in just 1 second. Allow us to dive in. All right.
This is the 112th episode of Middle Ground, and we want you to help us decide what the next 112 episodes will be. Join our Middle Ground Patreon community and make Middle Ground with us.
I was chosen to read the following prompt. White Americans have way more advantages than Black Americans.
I think I'm a rarity here.
It would seem so.
Do white Americans have more advantages because they're white, or do just white Americans have advantages because of historic factors? I think that people want to argue at the end of the day over whether it's because you're white or not. I think that the answer is because you're white in the past, and that's how it kind of carries over to today. You know, even in times of the United States history where black people tried to build wealth, you know, with the Tulsa riots and everything, where that this wealth has been destroyed. And something that's upsetting to me is when conservatives talk about how we can't blame the past for what's happening in the present. That is true to some extent, but then the next breath they'll talk about how important it is to have dual parent households, how important it is to have a strong family, to have responsibility passed on from parent to child. And we've seen in the past that because of racial issues, that process has been severely disrupted.
The funny thing is that agreeing with all these things is when I did my research when I was younger, which arrived me to my standpoint of being a conservative, because I believed it was racist, Democrat, liberal ideologies and policies dating all the way back to the 1800s, all the way up to the 1960s, and then the purported big switch. But I think it was more so when Democrats decided to be a bit more cloak and dagger about their true opinions of black people and be more secretive and more, oh, we want to help you by, you know, doing these things and seeing them as inferior.
Doing what things?
Affirmative action, welfare, all sorts of things that eventually ruin our culture and places where we are now.
So
but I want to get back to the history of it, because we're talking about...
Well, I just want to make sure we're clear. Giving them money hurt them, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, giving them, because if your father's out of the home, that's when we give you the money.
So that's the key to the equation right there. Again, both the initial guy, the white guy who was initially talking, and this younger black guy both have significant points. One of the key things that you and I must come to understand is this, that a lot of the hypocrisy that comes out on both sides of these arguments, the liberal lefts and the conservative right, get exposed when you start to try to deal in just binaries. There are nuances to everything. Indeed, the oppression and the castration of black economic upward growth in slavery, in the early Jim Crowism, with the destruction of property and destruction of business and lives within the black Tulsa and within the race riots in Tulsa. Black Wall Street was destroyed, again, eliminating the ability for generational wealth, and this was in the 1920s. So these things do play a role, because many individuals are the benefit of generational wealth or generational standing, where individuals have a out to bring them up out of whatever condition they're in because of the advancement of their particular ethnic or racial group. This happens in America. This is true. All you got to do is look at the Chinese, look at the Asian community, look at the Indian community. Those communities strive, and most of the individuals that are being employed by them are of their ethnicity. This does play a role. However, this young man breaks it down too. The Democrats have an issue because they under the guise of being helpful, Lyndon Baines Johnson, actually worked against the development and the securing of the black family in the 1960s. They wanted to remove the father from the house in order to give the mother the necessary funds in order to get a leg up. Remember, we did not start on the same playing field. Jim Crow South was in effect for virtually 100 years up until the 1965s. So the government and its responsibility for its egregious behavior against blacks economically and so forth needed to be repaired, because you created the condition of those inner city poverty lines, even though blacks were still thriving to a degree with the mother and the father in the house. But you chose to remove the father because you knew what was going on, and you did it cloaked under the guise of help. And we're talking about these Democrats, and it actually led to the destruction. And this is what he's talking about with the welfare and the welfare and the affirmative action. These things in and of themselves are not bad because they were necessary because of previous behavior. It is what it is. And this is why white people argue against DEI now. If it had no effect, if the discrimination against white people in the workplace now, if it had no effect, you wouldn't be arguing against it. You understand what I'm saying? So you know that it has an effect, but you're hypocritical when you look at the recent past and your position in the here and now when it comes to DEI. So allow them to continue.
If you're living in this housing,
so then give them the money while the dad's
rent free.
well, then give them the money while the dad's in the home.
If you're working this amount of hours and getting less than this amount of dollars, you're getting money from the government. Yes, it is incentivizing.
You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
I don't even know what that means in this scenario, because yes,
you're
okay, you want to talk about throwing babies out with the bathwater? Margaret Sanger wanted to exterminate the black race because she thought they were weeds. So yeah, we can literally talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's what Margaret Sanger, that's what Democrat policies wanted to do to my people. So that's why I feel so strongly about it, because it is these policies that date back centuries that were built off of the death and poverty of my people.
Let's take a breath.
So I'm breathing.
Okay.
So a lot of babies aren't, but I am, sadly.
I don't know what that means. When I say throw the baby out with the bathwater, you want to completely get rid of welfare, okay? Or at least the I don't want to put that on you. You haven't said that, but the conservative apparatus does, clearly. So giving money to a group of people does not hurt them.
I mean, sure, if you're talking about a lottery, you just hey, take money. But there are strings attached to that money.
Take all the money.
There are strings attached
to that money.
Give them
millions. Make them all millionaires. I don't care. Giving money to black people does not hurt them.
And that has not happened, though. That has not happened.
What do you...
So allow me to chime in real quick. If what he's saying is he wants to make a scenario saying giving black people money does not hurt them, I would push back against that because of the mindset of the dominant black culture. Not all black people, by no means. The dominant black culture. If you was to give these individuals, those who are engaged in the vile, vulgar, and violent behavior, those who are ratchet, those who are ghetto, those who don't value anything but consumption, then they would be worse off if you were to give us reparation. Those specific individuals, which is a large swath, would be worse off now than they are being broke, because they're going to go to the extreme and they're going to revisit poverty at a new level. The ones who have not changed the mindset has to be changed. And yes, this government owes reparations. We're not going to get reparations. So you must stand up, change your behaviors, change your patterns, and do what you need to do and do for self. So he is trying to present an argument that, again, yeah, you can give people money, but again, with the mindset that these individuals, and I'm talking about that specific group of individuals that have embraced this type of behavior, they will squander the money and become worse off. So that's a sad state to be in, but that's the mental and emotional state that most of these individuals are in who have embraced the ghetto culture. Not all black people by no means, but those who are the most impoverished and those who may not be impoverished, but who are super hype ghettofied, so to speak. Couldn't find a better word for than that. But you understand what I'm saying? Those who are engage in the degenerate behavior and they love it, they're going to squander it. They're going to become worse off. So allow them to continue.
What do you mean?
That has not happened. It hasn't been a reparations. It hasn't been this or that. It has been a welfare program, Great Societies Act that was built off of the idea of, hey, we get these families split up, we get these
so
people
then let
living
them
here.
keep the family together and keep all the money.
I mean, I guess so, but I guarantee you,
I guess so.
No way
Why would you not advocate for that?
So in your, I guess, research of like history of this country and everything, do you find like the Reconstruction era and like the failures of like what it wanted to be and then what it ended up being, and then which led into, which had downstream effects to enter into the Jim Crow era, and you have policies like redlining that influence how schools are funded. The downstream effects of slavery, do you think put Black people as generally in a worse off position than white Americans?
I think generation by generation, the effects of slavery have been diluted, but generation by generation, the effects of racism, welfare-based policies, and things of that nature became even more great. So in the 1880s or so, when we had our first Black members of Congress, which were indeed Republicans, I think that was a great start for things. But obviously, we had terrible things that happened, like the Tulsa massacre, among Black people being chased out of their homes by the KKK.
Sure.
All funded by the Democrat Party, all supported by the Democrat Party.
Well, I need to stop you there. Can you attribute not to the party, but to the ideology? Because I think when you think, regardless of whatever the party switch was, traditionally conservative values did not that's more aligned with more racist policies in this country.
It's very difficult to compare 2020's conservatism to 1880s conservatism.
Again, this debate is very interesting. Again, the young brother, he definitely has some history. He definitely is articulate, but there are other facets to this debate that both sides have a point. Again, we try to reduce, it's a reductionist type of approach when we go into these debates, conservatism versus liberalism, Democrat versus Republican. When you align yourself in these groups, you reduce your capacity to really see the whole picture, and you start to align with one side of the equation, and knowing that this situation is nuanced, it is complex. There is not a binary right or wrong with this in the bigger picture. There are subtle nuances that causes these situations to be what they are. Yes, racism had a major impact on Black prosperity, Black growth, etc. The Democrats beguiled Black people in the 1960s thinking that they were getting some help and a hand up, when actually they were getting conditioned into a state of neediness, a state of being a permanent subsidiary of the state. But the state put this in place by eliminating the father from the situation in order to help the Black mother, who again got off to a lower start than their white counterpart in many cases because of racist policies, etc. So the nuances are definitely there. At the end of the day, this divide in America is a real divide. It is a divide that it's going to take a long time to correct, if it can be corrected. But at the end of the day, we have to take responsibility for our behaviors, especially in 2025. We have to take responsibility for getting ourselves headed in the right direction, to implementing those things that will benefit us and not cause detriment to our growth. And these are the things that the individual must be willing to correct. We must depend on this government not to put us in a worse condition than we have to be, by squandering our money in tax dollars to foreign nations and to other dubious type of things that these senators, these congressmen engage in order to get money, get feedback, and to push a ideology that is not for the greater benefit of Americans as a whole. So again, I like this young brother. I like what he's saying. I like the other guy, what he was trying to get across. I don't agree with either one 100%. I do understand exactly what this young brother is saying, that again, the Democrats, they actually beguiled black people with the handouts while undermining their true growth. And as you can see from the 1960s, the black collective situation hasn't gotten any better. It has gotten worse. We're still at the bottom of every social economic comparison in America to other ethnic groups. And you've been riding with this Democrat Party trying to get these handouts for 60 years. It doesn't lead to prosperity. It doesn't lead to growth. It's only leading to more decadence, and it's leading to behavior and justifying and never calling out the bad behavior that keeps many of those individuals who happen to be black in the impoverished state they are, because they are not willing to change the condition. But the environment was set by the government's institutions and their racist policies towards blacks. You created the environment. Blacks are now responsible for perpetuating that environment. You can't blame this government for that any longer. All right. So again, if you like the commentary, you get value from the commentary, please like, subscribe, and comment. And again, remember, I have a fitness channel, Monte's Fitness. I'll leave the link in the description. Go over there, like, comment, and subscribe. We drop all the information on wellness, etc. You enjoy that channel. So as always, I'm sending you peace and always love. Peace.